person refused to sit on the back of the bus. She changed the ride for all of us. Oh, that's the power of one. Her diary found a light in the dark. A young girl's hope touched millions of hearts. Oh, that's the power of one. One grain of sand can turn the tide. One single spark can light the night. One simple dream, one gentle word, one act of love from someone can start a chain reaction. It all begins in the heart and the power of one. While the others threw stones, he didn't judge. He moved the world with the strength of his love. Oh, that's the power of one. One grain of sand can turn the tide. One single spark can light the night. One simple dream, one gentle word, one act of love from someone can start a chain reaction. It all begins in the heart and the power of one. Oh, all the little things we do every day, the smallest step can bring on a change. Oh, that's the power of one. 'Cause one grain of sand can turn the tide. One single spark can light the night. One simple dream, one gentle word, one act of love from someone can start a chain reaction. It all begins in the heart and the power of one. The power of one. The power of
Good morning. My name is Ari Obenson, President and CEO of the International Institute of St. Louis. Thank you for joining us for this speaker series. The International Institute of St. Louis has as its mission to build a more connected and productive society to benefit immigrants, their families, and the wider society. We do this with a vision to create a diverse, inclusive, and thriving community. The Institute is known for the Festival of Nations. And this year, as part of the Festival of Nations season, we picked the theme, Bridging Cultures, Inspiring Action. And one of the ways in which we choose to do it is through educating and empowering people towards building a more inclusive society. And so we came up with this speaker series called Inclusion St. Louis, where primarily we're asking and trying to answer the question, is an inclusive St. Louis possible? And if it is possible, how? And if it's not possible, why? And we are hoping that this provocative question is going to inspire people into action, because it's only possible if we choose to make it possible, if each one of us plays our part in making this possible. Today, we are going to be having a conversation around how the practice of diversity, equity, and inclusion can lead to a more inclusive society. And I'm thrilled to have the panelists that are with us today. So join me in welcoming our panelists here today. First, I'm going to welcome to recognize Monica Campbell from Enterprise Bank and Trust. Monica, welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here. Our cameras are still disabled, but I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
We'll take a moment to enable the cameras here. Also joining us today is Brian Barlay. Brian is the engagement manager at Claim Academy. Thank you for joining us. And our moderator for today is none other than Debbie Monterrey, who is an award-winning journalist and broadcaster with KMOX Radio. Thank you for joining us today, Debbie.
My pleasure.
And at this point, like I said earlier, we're going to turn this over to you, Debbie, as moderator. And I would say that we are at your mercy, and tell our audience to enjoy this as we go along.
Well,
it's all yours, Debbie.
Thank you very much. And thank you for asking me to do this, because I have obviously been a fan and a supporter and a volunteer with the International Institute for a number of years. And I think this is such an important and timely topic, because I think a lot of people who are watching today would generally be supporters of the International Institute and diversity, equity, and inclusion. But I think that what we've seen over the past 5, 10, 15 years is that we are getting more diverse. We're getting there, but that's also causing some backlash. That's causing some people to say they don't like this. And, you know, we've seen the results of this over the last few years. So I think we should also maybe address today, how do we reach those people? You know, people watching today are probably going to be on board with diversity, equity, inclusion. But for those who are not, and for those who would fight against it, how do we talk to them about how it benefits not just a company, but also our communities and our neighborhoods and all of our lives? So I did want to definitely touch on that today. And just a little quick background on another reason that I'm interested in this topic. I am a first-generation American. My mother was born in the Netherlands. My father was born in Indonesia, and he's part Dutch. My daughter was born in China, and my son was born in Ethiopia. So I was born in Chicago, and I'm the boring one in my family. But I am definitely a person who loves the Festival of Nations, because I get to, you know, eat around the world in my neighborhood park. And I just think it is such a beautiful thing to see all of these amazing faces and cultures and foods and all of the amazing things that our diverse culture can bring to a neighborhood. But just also, I've seen how diversity, equity, and inclusion can work in a workplace, and why it's so important, because newsrooms traditionally have always been pretty much a white male place. And I've been doing news most of my adult career. And it's gotten better. It's definitely getting more diverse, but you can imagine when you have a monoculture in a newsroom, it's not that big of a deal if you're just reporting on this is what happened at the State House today, this is what happened on the City Council today, but it's all those other stories that are generated by reporters themselves who say, this is what they're talking about in my church or this organization that I'm involved in or my neighborhood. But if everybody has that a same experience, those are the only stories that are getting out. And there's a huge part of our society and our culture and a lot of people who are not getting represented in the news. And then what's on the news gets perpetuated as this is normal. So I think we're seeing a lot more diversity. We're seeing a lot more voices getting stories from sectors of society that we didn't hear from before. I know the Washington Post just announced they're expanding their newsroom and they're hiring a diversity, equity, and inclusion person to make sure that they have more diverse voices. And the Kansas City Star a few months ago put out an editorial saying that basically apologizing for the last 100 years of not representing the Black community well at all and admitting that they ignored important stories and other stories about Black people in Kansas City were very negative and that they pledged to do better. So I think all those things are really important, but I think we probably wouldn't be getting there if it weren't for people like all of you who are very much on the ground working towards diversity, equity, inclusion, or DEI. So Monica, I wanted to start with you and just go around the panel quickly. What does diversity, equity, and inclusion mean to you and to Enterprise, and how do you go about making that happen?
Debbie, diversity and inclusion is very important to me personally, as well as Enterprise Bank. One of the things that I looked at before I even decided to join the bank was I looked to see what did diversity look like, and it didn't look like me. And one of the decisions in joining the bank was knowing and understanding that they had programs that I felt that the community needed, but in order to share that information, I knew that I needed to be there to help make that change. So since joining Enterprise for over the last 7 years, I do see several changes within the bank. The bank has been intentional about hiring more diverse leaders and having those open and honest conversations, understanding that diversity is necessary as far as changing financial institutions and the culture of the bank. We recently created a African American Business Resource Group that has been made official. You know, it's the first that the bank has ever had. So we are taking steps toward the right direction in order to create change in our culture.
And Brian, let's talk about Claim Academy, which for people who aren't familiar, I love the mission of Claim Academy is, and you can fill us in more, but teaching people the very important job skills of coding and software development, which, as we know, is one of the big jobs out there, one of the big careers of the future. So what does it mean for you, DEI, at your workplace?
Yeah, thank you, Debbie. You know, at Claim Academy, we believe in changing people's life. You know, so our CEO, the founder, him himself is an immigrant. So we always try to make the intentional effort to create capacity for minority folks in St. Louis, whether they are currently in the military, whether they're veteran, whether they're immigrants who just came to the States, been here for a couple of years, or whether they were born immigrants who've been in St. Louis or United States for the past 10 years. We're always trying to see how can we enable them to the next step in their life. What resources do they need? How can we help build that foundation for them? So once they graduate from Claim, then they'll be able to navigate what the professional world looks like, whether it's through the immigrants community, through the minority community, or through the overall St. Louis ecosystem as a whole.
And Monica had mentioned that when she started at Enterprise, there weren't a lot of people who looked like her. And that is a big deal when you're going into something like coding, when you're going into software development, that you might feel like, if I'm the only person who looks like me, maybe I don't belong here. Do you have, is that a challenge?
No. Even my first day at Claim when I was interviewed, I mean, this is the first time since I've been in America for the past 10 years. The folks that interviewed me, 3 of them were immigrants, 2 of them were Africans. So I was really excited, you know. I was like, yes, I want to work here, you know. They were asking me a question. I was excited. I was like, yo, tell me about your life. And then one of the interviewers was like, Brian, okay, we can talk about that later. Let's go to the question. I was like, I'm really excited. And the one thing about inclusion is that it just inspired me to see myself, you know, among other people. You know, just to see other people. I can see Monica, like, wow, she's the vice president of a big corporation. I would like to be like her. If she can do it, I can do it. What are the formulas? Hey, Monica, can I talk to you? Let me see the part of the different programs, the different community that you're part of. I want to start building that up right now. And also, and not only for me, but also creating a platform, the people that will come after me, so that they can have like this pipeline of, you know, minority folks who are achieving greatness to reach that upward mobility.
And Ari, I wanted to ask you a question. I'm not sure why I'm getting feedback here. Apologize for that. But you had mentioned something that really struck my fancy, because we do need to define terms sometimes so that everyone knows what we're talking about. And we in America talk about equality and people being equal, which is not the same thing as equity. So can you talk about, in your estimation, what are the definitions of those two, and what should we know about them? Oh, you're muted.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Debbie. And this, I know this has been sparked over the weekend. There's been a lot of conversation about this, but there is a difference between equality and equity. Equality means that individuals or a group of people are given the same opportunities so they can achieve their greatest potential. Whilst equity recognizes that each person has a different circumstance. And so resources should be allocated to people based on those circumstances. And why is that important here in this conversation about inclusion? I've always said that, you know, it's important because not everybody in the community, if we imagine this to be a race, a 100-meter race, not everybody has the same starting point. You know, some people, based on their circumstances, are at the starting point, and a few other people may be far behind the starting point just because of the circumstances, the background that they have, and where they come from. And so if we want to see inclusion, we have to create opportunities for people to level up, so that we kind of level the playing field and then give people the opportunities that they can achieve their greatest potential. Somebody had given me a visual representation of it, as that imagine there was a fence and we all had to look above the fence to see what was on the other side. And there will be some people that are taller who would have a better view over the fence, and some people that are shorter who may not even be able to see over the fence. So equality is the same fence that everybody has to look over, and equity is putting a stool for the shorter person to stand on it so that they too can get the same view that the taller person is having.
Monica or Brian, anything that you want to add on equity and equality? Because I think that it's a very important difference. So thank you for pointing that out. I also think that it is interesting that we have the 3 of you here on this panel, because in some workplaces they might say like, well, we have a Black person on our staff, and think that they've done their job. But the 3 of you clearly have very different backgrounds, come from very different places. So it's not enough to just say we have, you know, I know that some companies just, you know, tick the box, and that's just not enough for people to see representation in the workplace. Monica?
I totally agree. I think that change comes from the top of the organization, and it's creating accountability measures for those stakeholders with the decisioning power to create change, because we, within the African American Business Resource Group, we can talk amongst each other all the time, all the while, to say what we need, what changes should be made, and some of the things that we want done. But until those who have the power to make those decisions have a changed mindset and truly want to make a difference and create a culture of inclusion, change won't occur. So you have to start from the top, and then it trickles down. So having those hard conversations is very important. And then even if you have to bring in outside counsel in order to take a look at your particular institution to say, okay, these are the changes that we need to make. I think that, just taking a look at your own individual organization, we oftentimes have so much rhetoric and so many conversations about it, which I truly appreciate the conversation. But again, it goes back to the accountability measures. We can continue to talk, but until we create a strategic plan and hold the decision makers accountable, change won't occur. And unfortunately, for those of us who are, have the seat at the table, the one or two or the two or three that are in the office, we're not afforded the opportunity to press pause. We're not afforded the opportunity to not have those conversations, because as soon as we cease and stop having those conversations, it doesn't happen anymore. So the work is never done. So we have to continue having these conversations, but hold executives accountable.
Brian, I think sometimes people think of diversity in terms of Black and white, but as Ari can tell you, at the International Institute, I mean, there's a whole rainbow of people in our community who may not be represented, but also religion and sexual orientation. There's so many different ways when we talk about inclusion and diversity. So how do you address that?
I think it is important to look at the history of race in America. And also it is important to look at, racism in America. And some of this, history of injustices that plague various communities, especially the Black community, still continue to plague the Black community. I think that's the beginning of it, and from there, then we can look at intersectional identity, in terms of like the queer community, in terms of foreign-born individuals, in terms of people that have neurodiversity, Oftentimes people talk about, Black and white is not the issue of Black and white. It is the issue of white supremacy in the United States, and also the way the systems function. We have to make space. Monica talked about creating a space for accountability. That's something that we need to do. Oftentimes people at the beginning of whatever the fiscal year is, folks have all this elaborate idea of what they want to do in terms of diversity implementation. Over the course of the year, people tend to stagger around because there is no platform of accountability. And the folks that are carrying on this great work, they're so overwhelmed with so many responsibilities, so many tasks. And at the end, they get burnt out. There's like, I don't know what to do. There's so many things I need to focus on. Sometimes there is support there, but at the same time, the support is not there. So it has to be ingrained within the fabric of the organization. If we truly focus about diversity, what I would think about the Black community, what I would think about the queer community, what I would think about foreign-born community, what I would think about neurodiversity, people that have different disability, and how can we create changes? It has to be cross-cultural, inter-department. Not only one department should focus on it. HR should focus on diversity, whatever other department is, because if it's just the office of DEI or the office of this, it has to be within the finance department Who are you giving your funds to? You know, it has to be with a community partnership. Who are you including? Which speakers are you having? You know, then you look at the company itself. The speaker that you're inviting, are they representation of the people that are here? Are they representation of your clients? So we have to look at the holistic aspect of diversity. And then from there, we can go on to see what can we do? How can we create a system of accountability? Who can we partner up with? Does the folks that are in charge of this, do they need help? And how can we give them the support that they need to help promote the mission that they're trying to go through?
Ari, at the beginning of this, I had mentioned that there has been backlash against diversity. And I just, this morning was having a conversation with somebody and we were talking about, you know, critical race theory has become this big talking point, but there's a proposal to ban it in Missouri right now. And we were seeing the irony of, gee, banning discussion of systemic racism is kind of the definition of systemic racism. And some people don't want to have that conversation. As Monica said, you have to keep talking about it all the time. So this is certainly one way we can talk about it. But Ari, I'd like to get you know, your thoughts and everyone's thoughts on how do we keep these conversations going, not just in a workplace, but in our communities and in our neighborhoods.
Well, thank you. For someone who originally comes from Cameroon, immigrant myself, and in the country Cameroon, there is a dictatorial regime there. And typically, the way that you make things popular is by banning them. So I think the attempt of trying to ban critical race theory really essentially has opened people's minds to what exactly critical race theory is. And critical race theory is nothing but an understanding of who we are, what the challenges that we faced on our journey, and with the goal of ensuring that those challenges that plagued our past do not continue to plague our future. I strongly believe we are having this conversation, and this is a conversation that will continue within the community. You know, all of these conversations are people who are rigidly committed to the past, who are stuck within what happened in the past and are failing to see what the future holds. And the future light is ahead of us. We must define that future. And having a conversation, whether you call it critical race theory or not, is really educating ourselves for what the future looks like. If we can believe in what the future looks like, if we can understand that the future could be inclusive and we can all walk towards it, we can overcome all of that. All that it takes is walking in each other's shoes and being able to understand why people are different based on their background. Having a common purpose as a community, like having conversations like this and moving ahead as a community. So whilst those conversations will keep going on, those holding us back, I always say to people that you either embrace the future and have a way to influence it, or you remain stuck to the past, and then the future will come and you will not be able to influence it. So for those who are stuck behind, join us and let's work together towards a more inclusive society.
Monica, how do you approach this, not just in your job, but in a community where some people truly feel that diversity means that you're taking something away from them and giving it to someone else? They feel as if you're taking something from them.
Conversation and education, because we all have our own biases. I mean, that's just, you know, within us. It, you know, has to do with our upbringing, our values, education. So many things affect our own personal biases, and you just have to continue to have those conversations and try to show people from different points of views I mean, Ari, I think you gave an excellent analogy about the fence. You know, so you started here. I'm here. You know, so the playing fields were never level. So I couldn't take anything from you because I've been down here all the time. So it's just trying to let those who feel that something is being taken away from them, you know, continue to educate and have conversation.
And Brian, I'll let you answer that if you have anything that you want to add to that particular topic, but also I have been told that you are a DEI ambassador, and I'm wondering what that means and if that gives you any extra responsibility here in this conversation today.
I can clarify what that meant. So while I was at Webster University for my graduate studies, I was part of SGA, and SGA, I was part of the executive leadership team, and my position was the ambassador for student inclusion, was the DEI ambassador. So essentially with that, my position and my team, we think about how can we create capacity for marginalized students on campus? In what ways can we be radical in our approach? In what ways can we challenge the institution about things that they're doing and things that they're not doing? And one of the things in which my team tried to do is to create a coalition of student leaders of color, student leaders from marginalized population, which include the queer community, Hispanic students, students from Asia, Black students, Muslim students, and all of those individuals, just to see what can we do on campus as a student leader as a whole. What areas do we need to do to help liberate and empower one another? And also, how can we foster connectivity? Going back to what Monica said about education, I wanted to create a platform in which all these people see that, we all have shared goals, shared vision, and shared struggle. And what platform needs to be in place in order for us to leverage those opportunities that we have, in order for us to connect with one another, as well as educate the Webster population, the Webster community about diversity, our different stories, where we come from, so that they can know that at the end of the day, we have more in common than, we have more in our differences. We have more commonality than our differences. So that was our attempt, to do that, because oftentimes when people are not really associated with different groups, they tend to have is either, pull or push. They tend to pull back and say, it's because this individual doesn't talk like me, doesn't think like me, that means, we're different. And they interpret different as a threat. I don't know what this is outside of my comfort zone. Our goal is to let them know, hey, we're just human beings. We just want connection. We just want to have sense of belonging, want to be part of a community. And in this case, this is a Webster community. So I think that's a really great approach. And I've been doing that with a lot of things that I'm part of, even with the African community, just to create a platform that foster connectivity, that foster collaboration. Because you don't know until we don't know what we don't know. And, if I get to know more about Monica, more about, area, then I can say, oh, wow, we really, when you were a child, you were just like, I'm just like you when you were a child, the things that you've been going through, I can connect with you more. I feel like we need to create that platform in St. Louis, even within the various immigrant community, because right now we're all so spatially fragmented. We're in different areas. Or if there's a platform for connectivity in which we can come together, I know Festival of Nations does that, or like a regular platform, especially for like the young folks. We can say, oh, wow, you were born in the Middle East, you're from Iran, you speak Arabic, Muslim, but we have that commonality of being an immigrant. You have that commonality of being a first generation immigrant in St. Louis, trying to make ends meet, trying to live this two dichotomy of being an American citizen and also being a first generation immigrant. And how can we navigate those platforms? How can we share our knowledge about the things that we're going through so it can help us to get to the next level? I always speak about upward mobility. What knowledge can we share? What did you do that worked for you? What did you do that didn't work for you? How can I implement that into my life so I can get to the next step?
Well, when you say that we don't know, I think it's also that people are afraid of what they don't know often. And I think that is part of the problem, that if you are only in your own little group and you don't know people of other races or religions, it's scary. And your, fear sometimes unfortunately comes out as anger, and you stay in your little bubble a little more. Ari, I wanted to ask you, because the question of this whole thing was, can we have a more inclusive St. Louis? So in your perfect world, what would an inclusive St. Louis look like? And should we have sort of that idea of what we're working towards? What would your perfect picture of inclusivity in St. Louis look like?
Yeah.
There you go.
Well, the perfect picture of an inclusive St. Louis is the true story of America. That, out of many, we are one, that America, the ideal of America is that people have come from different shores and built this beautiful tapestry that's supposed to represent America. But when we look beyond just the ideals of what America is and look to the streets and the various communities that are in St. Louis, we may not be able to see that picture that we want. And so the work of building an inclusive St. Louis is one that never stops, that we must always continue to see progress. And it's only going to be done by creating opportunities for us to look beyond the communities in which we are in. And such communities also include corporations. So corporations cannot talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace and have employees who have to go to a community that doesn't also embrace the same thing that's done. So there is a broader role that institutions and corporations have to play in not just ensuring that the employers of the company feel like the environment is inclusive for them, and yet the children have to go to schools and play in sandboxes of a community that doesn't necessarily represent that. So the vision of an inclusive St. Louis is one that can be made possible if we are inspired by the true story of what America represents, and if we take action every day to walk in the shoes of people who may not speak and look like us, or and embrace them as fellow citizens, our neighbors, our friends. That's how we're going to accomplish it, and it is absolutely possible, because too often, as I want to quote JFK here, too often we enjoy the comfort of opinion without the discomfort of thought. And sometimes it is the comfort of opinion that tells us a lot more about what is wrong than what is right. We can focus a lot on what can be right in this community, an inclusive St. Louis. And if we do that, we will change our mindset, we will change our ways, and we'll create opportunities for this community to thrive.
Monica, let me ask you, because I know that you probably in your job have goals that you want to hit for sure, but in your, if you could have a crystal ball or a magic wand, what would an inclusive St. Louis be like for you?
An inclusive St. Louis for me looks like everyone being represented at all levels, at all times. So I think Brian said it earlier, it's not just, black and white, it's not just race, it's everything. It is physical ability, it's religion, it's, sexual orientation. It's allowing egos to be checked at the door, and people have to be willing to let go and give up something in order to allow others to have what they already have. The American dream is to have, the piece of the pie, the big house, the car, the everything. But, if you're holding on to everything and you're just having those conversations about what diversity and inclusion look like, but you're not willing to let go, change will never happen. So in order to make that change, you have to be willing to give up something personally, and that's not always easy to do. So for me, an inclusive St. Louis looks like a total mindset change where everybody is able to come together and respect each other's values and have deep, hard conversations, but understand that you can't keep what you have. You can't keep what you have in order for everybody to not only sit at the table, but eat at the table and create tables for other people that look like that.
I've often said that people who aren't necessarily from St. Louis can come to St. Louis and love it and see a different St. Louis than the people who've lived here all their lives. And I would think that might be the same for you, Brian, not even necessarily being born in this country, that you can come here and see it from different eyes and from a different perspective than some of the rest of us. So I'm curious as to, maybe since you've been working in diversity, equity, inclusion, what changes you've seen from maybe when you first got here to where we are today. Have you seen an improvement? Have you seen things that definitely still need a lot of work? Oh, Brian's on mute.
There have been an improvement. I think when you look at diversity, the platform, is expanding. People are more intentional about the pursuit of diversity. And there are other individuals who are amplifying the voices on behalf of other people, on behalf of various community. I think it's there. It's an ongoing process, because diversity itself, it's such a large spectrum, so it cannot be done in one day. I think we should continue to be intentional with our efforts. We should continue to create system for agitators, because we can only move forward if we have individuals that challenge the system, individuals that hold people accountable. I think oftentimes in various institutions, some people want to speak up, but they're scared that they might get fired. They're scared that they might get some type of repercussion. But I think if all institutions create that platform for agitators, for people to come and have a candid conversation and challenging what the institution is doing and what they're not doing and where they could go, I think that would be a great future for St. Louis. One thing that I have not yet seen, honestly, is opportunities, leadership opportunities for the young folks. It's coming, but it's not there. When you look at various organizations, we look at the board of directors, there's no voice for the young generation. When you look at the leadership team, there's no voice for the young generation. There's every once in a while, you see organization work, civic engagement that particularly pertain to, the youth and young professional. I think moving forward, that is a platform that we need to create. How can we empower, equip, and liberate the future of St. Louis, Because we can't just wait. It's like, they don't have the opportunity yet, they don't have the experience, they're not there yet. That goes back to what, Ari mentioned earlier, equity. If they're not there yet, then give them an opportunity. We won't learn, we wouldn't just know just like that. We have to, it's a trial process. We try, we get things, okay, cool, this didn't work out, let me try again. And during the process of doing that, then they can share those knowledge back to the younger generations. Like, well, I did this is what worked, this is what didn't work. And then in the next 5 to 10 years, then you see like the young leaders taking charge, making laws and policy that truly affect the young people, because you see last year, a lot of people were protesting. They want to be included, they want their voices to be included. Even this year, there's a lot of young activists who are willing to learn, who are eager to enact changes, but they don't have the structural power to enact those changes.
More and more companies adding diversity, equity, and inclusion officers. I'm curious, Monica, do you have any concerns that is just going to be a position that companies add so that they can say, yes, we have this? Some companies are going to do a great job of it, obviously, and some are just going to have that position. I'm just wondering, is there a group or an organization where you all can exchange best practices and to make sure that companies are staying on track, as opposed to just saying, oh yeah, we have one of those?
Yes, the DOJ, the Department of Justice, has a great way to hold financial institutions accountable for those who just have the DEI officer, because they take a look at your lending practices. They take a look at your employer, the number of diverse employees that you have. So there's definitely measures that are taken into place. We also talk amongst each other about best practices, but yeah, for financial institutions, I would say that it's the DOJ.
Do you think that it might be an issue for other companies that are not in the financial sector, that they may just have it in name only and not be maybe putting as much emphasis behind it?
Oh yes, definitely. I think it's just the nature of business. And I think that if some companies or corporations feel that they're able to get away with just putting a DEI officer, that's when it comes down to, again, the accountability measure. Those who work for their corporation have to speak up, have to be willing to have a voice. And like Brian said, that may not always be easy, because you may think, I don't want to speak too loud because I don't want to tread any water and have everyone looking at me, because I would like to make change. But the video area that you all played at the beginning, the power of one, it only takes one person to have the change. So it's an individual social responsibility, even in the workplace. Yes, you have to know how to go about having those conversations, but we all have a responsibility to ensure that the companies that we work for are being fair and equitable.
And Ari, I just wanted to ask you, because for some people who don't see the value of what we're talking about today and can only really see things in terms of, well, what does it mean for me? What would you say to someone if you're having a conversation with them? Why is diversity, equity, and inclusion important? And what is it going to do for me or for my neighborhood or for my life?
Yeah, there is an African saying that if a child is not welcome, a newborn child is not welcome to the village, that child will grow up burning down the village so that the village will feel its warmth. In that same way, the people that you ignore, the people that we leave out of participation, could actually be the people that give us the ability to achieve our greatest potential. The records would show, as we talk about American society, the significant role that the foreign-born and immigrant population plays towards building a more prosperous economy. Look at the top, over close to half of the Fortune 500 companies have been started by either foreign-born, the foreign-born population, or the next generation of an immigrant family. We know that they're more likely to contribute to starting up businesses, small businesses. So that's just an example. But society as a whole benefits if we give everybody the opportunity to achieve their greatest potential. What does that mean? That nobody knows who's going to have the biggest answer for the next epidemic or pandemic that we're going to face, right? It could be that ignored child sitting in the classroom that doesn't have the necessary resources that can enable that child achieve their greatest potential. We are doing this because of us. We really need to see our existence as largely intertwined, and therefore the question of inclusion just means embracing everybody's talent, everybody's capability, so that we build a society that truly represents us.
And Brian, I'll ask you, if you're sitting at a bar and people are having a discussion about, this why is diversity important? Why is equity and inclusion important? Do you have a good answer for them?
On the bar, probably not, because they're intoxicated. Probably not, because they're intoxicated, because it could go so many ways. So many ways. Yeah, but I guess just trying to see like where they're coming from. People. It could be folks from various backgrounds saying that. Why is diversity, and inclusion important? Because I know different people from different backgrounds and sexuality say that. But I would just tell them that, it is important because there is beauty and there is strength in diversity. Multiple minds is better than one mind. We have to figure out radical ways to enact transformational changes.
Monica, is it more difficult these days to I know everybody who's hiring says that it's very difficult to hire and everyone's looking for workers. Does that make it easier or harder to have a more diverse workplace in the situation we're in right now?
Just Debbie, if you don't mind, there is also a question in a queue for Monica.
Sorry.
So she might as well also pick that up while she has the floor.
Yes, I did see that. The question was, how do banks show equity when it comes to policies, particularly in lending, because a majority of immigrants and Black people are always disadvantaged when it comes to this. Getting to the root of lending is typically credit. Supporting those not-for-profit organizations who focus on helping to rebuild and restore credit. Education, education early to let our high school students and college students know how important credit is, and creating programs. Being a part of down payment assistance programs, home repair programs, is something that's very important, making sure that those financial institutions are a part of the different programs that are being sponsored within the community that's going to help elevate the lending practices. And sometimes you have to do alternative lending. When you walk into the bank, it's going to be the conventional lending. This is the standard credit score that you require. Banks have to, I believe, do some more creative and alternative lending solutions. So because some of it, a lot of it could be systemic. And again, if people were not educated or, need more help in that area in order to get there, you have to start with the root and then also create solutions in order to help get more minorities to the lending space where they need to be.
All right. Were there any other questions I missed, Ari? I apologize. I'm not seeing the questions. I don't want to skip anybody. Oh, you're muted. Sorry.
No, I think at this point, no, we don't have any. Oh, there is another question, which also goes to Monica, but I think she's answered this, and it says, people of color, immigrants, and other non-white working in the financial institutions and banks, when will they break away and form their own banks and financial institutions? Or do you think that that's possible? That's a tough, it is. That's a tough one. Sorry.
I answered it via chat, and I just said that Black Wall Street proved that it is something that can be done. Is it something that needs to be done now? Of course, it would take a lot of work, but I don't have the answer, for that. But yes, it is something that can be done.
And then I just wanted to quickly go back to the last question, and I'll start with Monica and then to Brian. But as you're working to have a more diverse workforce, what is that like right now when we have a worker shortage and it seems like all employers are struggling to fill enough positions?
I think that looking in different places, you can't continue to look in the same places. So having partnerships with, the HBCUs and having those conversations with not-for-profit organizations. So again, it's being creative, otherwise you're turning the same people through different organizations, but you have to be willing to be open-minded and willing to make a change.
Any thoughts on that question, Brian? Is it difficult to fill positions at this time? And how do you make sure that those are filled with a diversity of workers?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, definitely. Since, the economy is opening back up and a lot of people very skeptical about going back to their former job. I think what Monica mentioned about HBCU and affinity groups. So they have affinity groups throughout the United States in different cities. I think making that intentional effort to reach out to those groups, and as well as, working on the work culture of the institution that you're at. Does this work culture celebrate and recognize diversity? Does this work culture make some accommodation for people from diverse background? And also now, does this work culture have, the hybrid solution when you're at work? Because most people want to work remote. It's like, how can you have them accommodate? How can you meet folks in the middle? Most people love the way remote work, to be frank, but how can you say, okay, cool, I really want you, but this is what I'm going to do. Let's have a hybrid solution. We're going to start celebrating. If we haven't already done it, let's just start celebrating different diversity. Let us be proactive. It's not only about, race, culture, ethnicity, but also about generational diversity, because the younger generation and the older generation, when it comes to work ethic, is different, because there's been that cultural shift in the workforce. What system do we have in place to ensure that, we are making spaces to accommodate, people of my generation? What do we have in place and how can we move forward with this? And also, how can it's not only about talking about it during orientation, because in most institutions, when you start working there, they tell you, we have diversity, we have this, but it's an ongoing process. To which programs do you have that testify to what you said at the beginning of onboarding?
All right, I think we have time for one last question, and I'm going to go around the horn here, starting with Ari. But bridging cultures, inspiring action, that is the theme of the Festival of Nations this year, which I'm not sure if I've mentioned is my favorite festival of the year. And I missed it last year, so I can't wait. So I'd like each of you to share an enriching experience that you have had with a culture that is foreign to St. Louis or foreign to yourself. And I'll start with you, Ari. We'll take you off mute here.
Well, thank you very much. I think in very recent months, one of the things that I've learned about St. Louis is, and it's really an opportunity offered by the International Institute with the Wednesday pop-up dinners. It's been fascinating to see, and I don't want to trivialize this with food, but the fact that we're able to see every week a different cuisine in St. Louis, whether it's Laotian or Iraqi, and just having the opportunity to see that these communities are right here. They are friends, they are our neighbors, and we have the ability to taste Laotian food without traveling there. It means that there are people here who bring the rich culture of that country to this community. And we need to find that, embrace it, and it just enhances our experience. That has really surprised me. I am starting to work here at the International Institute, and it also tells me that there's a lot more that I have to discover.
Monica?
Ask me the question again.
Oh, can you share one enriching experience that you've had with a culture that is foreign to St. Louis?
Okay, I would say it would be working with our employee by the name of Uriah. Although she's out of the New Mexico area, she works with Native Americans, and you know, learning her culture and um, learning about their holidays and just the different things that are important to Native Americans, things to say, not to say, learning about the different tribes, and getting to know her, I think has been truly enriching to me. And it opens my eyes when, you know, I see things in St. Louis that has something to do with Native America, because then, you know, her and I can have those conversations. But these are things that I didn't know or would have never known had I not had the experience of working with her.
Excellent. All right, we'll finish up with you, Brian. What experiences have you had?
I would look at that. So undergrad. So I went to undergrad at St. Louis University. I got a major in sociology. My mentor for the sociology department, her name is Elena Koramovich. She was like my mom at SLU. So the moment I landed at SLU, the first day, she's like, "Hey, how are you doing?" And she's like, "I heard an accent. Where are you from?" And I told her where I'm from. And then, you know, she was there with me when I went to Cape Town, when my sister passed away. I came back to St. Louis, and I told her, I was like, "I don't think I want to come back to school." And she gave me reassurance that things happen in life, but if I continue to persevere, things will be okay. You know, she was my everything. She was my mentor. She was my therapist. She ensured that I went to class because I was stressed out. And ever since then, she's always been with me. And she told me a lot about the Bosnian culture. We exchanged, that cultural enrichment about, being an immigrant in St. Louis, being an immigrant in America, trying to reach high, trying to, achieve upward mobility and some of the struggles, and that comes with. I think every once in a while we need that. I think if it wasn't for her and some other people, I would not have made it, at SLU. She made sure that I went to class, made sure that I got good grades, made sure that, she created capacity for me. She included my name in spaces that I never thought I would be. Because of her, I did a lot of great things at St. Louis University. And even beyond St. Louis University, she reached out to me and tells me about various opportunities that she thinks might be great for me.
Excellent. Well, Ari, I think you had a great point about discovering all the food of different nations, which I think is why I love Festival of Nations so much, because, way through to a person's heart is through their stomach, right? And we have a lot of great cultures and a lot of great food here in St. Louis. And that's all the questions that we've got. I think we're wrapping up our hour here. So I just want to thank Monica and Brian and Ari. Thank you for inviting me to join, and I'll let you wrap it up here.
Well, thank you, Debbie, Monica, and Brian for being part of this conversation. The Inclusion St. Louis speaker series continues. We're taking a break on the July 5th holiday because it's Independence holiday, but we will continue on July 12th, and we will be talking about the economic impact of inclusion. And we have some great speakers lined up from great organizations that are going to be sharing their thoughts about the economic impact of inclusion. So please stay tuned. For those of you who heard about the Festival of Nations, we have on Wednesday our pop-up dinner. So if you swing by, you can get food from another diverse culture, and we will continue to engage you with our Inclusion St. Louis speaker series on July 12th. Once more, thank you all for being with us and spending this hour. It's been great. It's been awesome.
Thank you all.
Thank you.